Part 1: A soldier's search for his lost partner. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quiet Arizona town. The dry wind carried the scent of dust and desert sage, filling the air with the unmistakable essence of the Southwest. Jack Reynolds, a former military operative, adjusted his worn-out jacket as he strode toward the town's humble animal shelter. His mind clouded with unease and anticipation. 2 years had passed since he left the service, 2 years of restless nights and haunting memories. But nothing left a greater void in his life than the absence of his K9 partner. Rex. The German Shepherd had been more than a companion, he had been Jack's lifeline during their most dangerous missions. Together, they had faced war zones, saved lives, and survived the unimaginable. But when an explosion during their last mission left Jack injured, Rex had been forced into early retirement, taken away while Jack recovered in a military hospital. Since then, Jack had searched relentlessly for Rex, scouring military databases, calling shelters, and tracking any lead that might bring him back to the one soul who had never let him down. Until yesterday, when his sister, Emily, sent him a message with a picture attached. "Jack, you need to see this. They found a dog at a shelter in Tucson. It looks like Rex." Jack had barely waited for dawn before setting off toward the address she provided. His heart pounded with uncertainty. What if it wasn't Rex? What if it was? And what if Rex didn't remember him? The shelter was a modest building, its rusted gates creaking as Jack pushed them open. A chorus of excited barks and whimpers greeted him, but Jack remained focused, scanning each kennel as he walked through the aisles. Dogs of all sizes and breeds wagged their tails or stared at him with hopeful eyes, but none of them were Rex. Looking for something specific? Jack turned to see a young woman in a staff uniform approaching him. Her name tag read Claire, and her kind eyes studied him with curiosity. I think you have a German Shepherd here. One that was picked up recently." Claire nodded slowly. "Yeah, we do. He's in the back. He's different." Jack's stomach clenched. "Different? What do you mean?" Claire sighed, motioning for him to follow. "He's not like the others. He doesn't react to people. He doesn't bark or wag his tail. He just exists." Jack's breath hitched. He knew what trauma could do to a soul. He had seen it in soldiers. He had seen it in himself. As they reached the secluded kennels, Claire stopped beside the last cage. "There he is." Jack's world stopped. Lying in the farthest corner, away from the light, was a German Shepherd with black and tan fur. His once proud posture was replaced by weariness and stillness. His eyes, which had once held unwavering loyalty and fire, were now dim and lifeless. Jack swallowed hard. "Rex?" The dog's ears twitched, but his gaze remained distant. No spark of recognition. No movement toward him. Nothing. Jack stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "It's me, buddy. It's Jack." Still, Rex did not move. Jack felt his chest tighten as a cold realization set in. Rex didn't remember him. But Jack wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not ever. Part 2: A silent battle for trust. Jack's grip on the metal bars of the kennel tightened as he watched Rex, the dog who had once protected him with unwavering loyalty, now lie motionless, lost in his own world. How had it come to this? Claire's voice was soft. "We don't know his full history. He was found abandoned at a smaller shelter out of state. They said he was aggressive, but..." She hesitated, looking at the dog's still form. "I don't think aggression is the problem. I think he's broken." Jack knew that feeling too well. He saw it in soldiers returning from war zones. He had lived it himself. "Let me take him," Jack said firmly. I know him. He was my partner. Claire's eyes widened. You're sure? Jack nodded, determination solidifying his decision. I won't leave him here. The ride home was eerily silent. Jack had laid a thick blanket in the back seat of his truck, but Rex didn't curl up like he used to. Instead, he stared blankly out the window, his body tense with unease. As they pulled up to Jack's house, a modest home on the outskirts of town, Jack hesitated before opening the door. Would Rex accept this new home? Would he ever trust him again? Come on, boy. Jack coaxed softly. Rex didn't move. Jack sighed, then turned away, heading inside and leaving the truck door open. Give him time. Let him decide. Minutes passed before he heard the sound of paws on gravel. Jack didn't turn, but he smiled faintly. Rex had made the first step. Inside, Jack had set up a familiar space, a dog bed, fresh food, and even a few toys. All ignored. Rex simply walked to a corner of the room, laid down, and stared at the wall. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't going to be easy. But he wasn't giving up. Part 3, The Ghosts of the Past. Days turned into a week, and Rex remained a shadow of his former self. Jack attempted everything: walks, familiar commands, even an old chew toy Rex used to love, but nothing broke the dog's silence. Then, one evening, as Jack sifted through an old military storage box, he found something. A worn dog vest. The very one Rex had worn during their missions. Jack placed it on the floor near Rex and stepped back. At first, nothing happened. But then, a flicker of recognition. Rex's ears twitched, his nose flaring as he sniffed the fabric. For a moment, his tail moved, just barely. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He remembers. It was the smallest of victories, but to Jack, it meant everything. Part 4, A Faint Light in the Darkness. Jack woke up before dawn, his military instincts still ingrained in his body. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of Rex's steady breathing from the corner of the living room. The German Shepherd hadn't shown much improvement, but last night, there had been something. A small flicker of memory when he sniffed the vest. Jack wasn't naive, trauma wasn't something that disappeared overnight. He knew this battle wouldn't be fought with grand gestures but rather with patience, time, and trust. He poured himself a cup of coffee, staring at the sunrise through his kitchen window. The desert morning painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, and for a moment, he allowed himself to enjoy the peace. But his mind quickly returned to Rex. Jack turned, his eyes settling on the German Shepherd curled up near the couch. The sight tugged at something deep inside him. The dog wasn't just refusing to engage, he was afraid to. Fear wasn't something Jack took lightly. He had seen it in soldiers who had lost too much. He had seen it in himself. Waking up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, hands shaking from memories he couldn't escape. And now he saw it in Rex. Jack took a deep breath and walked over. Small steps. Don't rush it. He crouched beside Rex, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The dog's ears twitched, but he remained still. Jack reached out, but instead of trying to pet him, he simply rested his hand on the floor between them. "Hey, buddy," Jack whispered, his voice low and calm. "I know it's hard, but I'm here." Rex didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't growl. It was enough. Part 5, Breaking the Barriers. That afternoon, Jack decided to try something different. Routine. Structure. It was how they had trained together in the military. How they had built a bond strong enough to withstand war zones and explosions. Maybe, just maybe, it could work again. Jack pulled out Rex's old leash, the one with his military tag still attached, and gave it a small shake. The jingle of the tag caused Rex's ears to perk up slightly. A good sign. "You remember this, don't you?" Jack said softly. "You used to love our runs." He knew better than to force Rex, so instead, he walked to the door and left it open before heading outside. If Rex followed, it would be by choice. Jack walked into the yard, stretching his muscles as he inhaled the crisp air. He took slow, deliberate steps across the gravel, making sure Rex could hear him but not feel pressured. One step. Then another. A few minutes passed. And then, the sound of paws against the dirt. Jack's heart clenched as he turned just slightly to see Rex standing at the threshold, watching him. His posture was tense. But he was there. "That's it, buddy," Jack encouraged, keeping his voice light. "Come on." For a moment, Rex hesitated, his head tilting slightly as if debating whether to trust the moment. And then, he stepped forward. Jack swallowed hard, pretending like this wasn't a big deal, but in reality, it was everything. Rex walked a few feet into the yard before stopping again, his nose twitching as he sniffed the morning air. Jack resisted the urge to move closer. "Don't push him. Let him set the pace." Instead, he casually sat down on the ground, resting his back against an old wooden fence. For a while, they just sat there, side by side, two wounded soldiers, carrying scars that words couldn't explain. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Part 6, A Spark of Recognition. Over the next few days, Rex's behavior began to change in small but significant ways. He started watching Jack more, tracking his movements with quiet curiosity instead of avoidance. When Jack cooked, Rex would linger near the kitchen, subtly drawn by the familiar scents. When Jack left the back door open, Rex would wander outside on his own, rather than staying curled up in his corner. And then, one evening, it happened. Jack was rummaging through an old box in his storage closet when he found something he hadn't seen in years, Rex's favorite rubber ball. A memory flashed through his mind, the image of a younger Rex bounding through the training field. The ball clutched between his teeth, tail wagging like a flag in the wind. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He turned, gripping the ball in his palm as he walked back into the living room. Rex was resting, his head on his paws. Jack crouched down and rolled the ball gently across the floor. It stopped just in front of Rex's paws. The dog's ears twitched. Jack held his breath. Rex sniffed the ball. His body tensed. Then, for the first time since their reunion, Rex lifted his paw and gently nudged the ball back. Jack's chest tightened. He remembers. It wasn't much, just a nudge. But to Jack, it felt like the world shifting back into place. Part 7, Rebuilding What Was Lost. That night, something changed. For the first time, Rex didn't sleep in the corner of the living room. Instead, he walked, by choice, into Jack's bedroom and curled up near the foot of the bed. Jack didn't say anything. Didn't move. Didn't push. He simply let Rex be there. It was a silent understanding. A bridge between the past and the present. And as Jack lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he felt something inside him begin to heal. 2. Because Rex wasn't the only one who had been lost. Jack had been lost too. But maybe, just maybe, they were finding their way back. Together. Part 8, The First Sign of Trust. The crisp Arizona morning was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of the wind through the sparse trees. Jack stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching as the first rays of sunlight bathed his backyard in gold. His eyes instinctively drifted toward Rex, who lay in the grass a few feet away. It had been almost 2 weeks since Jack had brought Rex home, and though progress had been slow, it was happening. Jack hadn't tried to force affection or demand recognition. Instead, he had given Rex the one thing both of them desperately needed: time. And today, something was different. Rex was still lying in his usual spot, but his posture wasn't as tense as before. His ears were perked, his eyes scanning the yard, not with fear but with awareness. Jack set his coffee down and decided to take a risk. He walked toward Rex, but not directly. Instead, he took a long, casual route, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The last thing he wanted was to make Rex feel cornered. When he finally reached the dog, he knelt down, resting one arm on his knee. "Morning, buddy," Jack murmured, his voice as gentle as the wind. For a moment, Rex didn't move. But then, the unthinkable happened. Rex lifted his head and looked at Jack. Not just a passing glance. Not the blank, lifeless stare that had haunted Jack for weeks. No, this was different. There was awareness in those deep brown eyes. Recognition. Jack felt his heart hammer in his chest. Rex was starting to remember. Part 9, Unspoken Words. Jack didn't push his luck. He simply sat there, allowing Rex to process the moment. Then, without thinking, Jack slowly reached out and rested his open palm on the ground between them, just like he had done before. Only this time, Rex reacted. The German Shepherd sniffed Jack's fingers. Jack held his breath. Then, with slow, hesitant movement, Rex nudged his nose against Jack's palm. Jack exhaled sharply. A mix of relief and emotion crashing through him like a tidal wave. It was a silent gesture. A small but undeniable act of trust. Jack didn't move. Didn't push for more. He simply let Rex take the lead. For nearly 2 minutes, neither of them moved. Then, just as carefully as he had approached, Rex pulled away and rested his head back on his paws. Jack didn't need any grand gestures. That one touch, the simple act of choosing to connect, was more than enough. He wasn't just some stranger in Rex's life anymore. He was someone that mattered. Part 10, Breaking Through the Past. As the days passed, Rex's behavior continued to shift in small, subtle ways. He started following Jack around the house, not closely, but just enough for Jack to notice. During their evening walks, Rex's posture became more confident. He no longer dragged behind or flinched at sudden sounds. But the biggest breakthrough came one stormy night. Jack had always loved the sound of rain. But Rex had always been different. Back in the military, storms meant danger. Thunder meant cover and silence. Jack had never given it much thought until now. That night, as the rain pounded against the roof, Jack sat on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. He had almost forgotten Rex was in the room until he heard it. A soft whimper. Jack turned his head instantly. Rex was standing at the edge of the hallway, ears pinned back, his entire body tense. He was afraid. Jack's heart squeezed. Slowly, he set the album aside and patted the couch beside him. "You don't have to be alone, buddy," Jack said, his voice steady but gentle. Rex hesitated. Jack saw the conflict in his posture, the way his muscles tensed as though debating whether to retreat or step forward. Then, Rex moved. One step. Then another. Until finally, he climbed up onto the couch and curled up next to Jack. Jack sat frozen for a moment, barely able to believe what was happening. Then, for the first time in years, Rex rested his head against Jack's leg. The weight of it sent a surge of emotions through Jack's chest. He didn't say anything. Didn't try to pet him or overwhelm him. Instead, he simply sat there, listening to the rain. The past wasn't erased. But in that moment, Jack knew. They were finally starting to heal. Together. Part 11, the bond that time couldn't break. Morning came softly, golden light spilling through the window. Jack woke up still on the couch, his muscles stiff from the awkward sleeping position. But what caught his attention wasn't the pain in his back. It was Rex. The German Shepherd was still there, still curled up beside him. Jack's chest ached in the best way possible. He reached down, running his fingers gently through Rex's fur. For the first time, Rex didn't flinch. Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. As if sensing the weight of the moment, Rex let out a small, content sigh. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a stubborn one, huh?" he murmured. Rex didn't move. Didn't respond. But for the first time in so long, Jack didn't feel alone anymore. And neither did Rex. They had both been lost. But they had finally found their way back. Together. Part 12, Home at Last. The Arizona sunrise bathed the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, stretching shadows across the quiet desert town. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sun-baked earth and the distant hum of morning life. Jack stood on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand. His eyes watching the yard where Rex lay, ears perked, alert yet calm. It had been a long journey, a battle not of war, but of healing. Rex was no longer the hollow, broken dog Jack had found at the shelter. He was no longer the unresponsive shadow of his former self. He was present. He was here. And most importantly, he was home. Jack set his coffee down, stretching his arms above his head. "All right, buddy. You ready?" At the sound of Jack's voice, Rex's ears twitched. His head lifted, his sharp brown eyes locking onto Jack's. And then, without hesitation, he stood up and trotted toward him. It wasn't forced. It wasn't uncertain. It was natural. Jack grinned. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The final test. The old military duffel sat at Jack's feet. Half open, revealing remnants of a past life, photographs, medals, and an old training vest. The very one Rex had worn during their missions together. Jack knelt beside the bag, pulling out the vest. He turned to Rex, holding it up. This was the moment of truth. Would he remember? Would he accept it? Jack's breath caught as Rex stepped forward. His nose twitched, sniffing the fabric. He didn't recoil. He didn't retreat. Instead, his ears perked, his tail giving a slow, hesitant wag. Jack smiled through the lump in his throat. "That's it, buddy." With careful hands, he slipped the vest over Rex's back, securing the straps like he had done 100 times before. He braced himself, watching for any sign of discomfort. But Rex stood still, his body no longer rigid with fear. Then, in an action so subtle yet monumental, Rex lifted his head and nudged Jack's arm. A silent understanding. A choice. A trust restored. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You're back, partner." Rex wagged his tail. A new beginning. That afternoon, Jack grabbed a leash. But this time, he didn't attach it. Instead, he walked toward the edge of his property, where the open desert stretched beyond, untamed and free. He turned back, looking at Rex. "You coming?" For a moment, Rex hesitated. Then, he ran. Not out of fear. Not away from something. But toward Jack. Toward their future. Jack laughed, running a hand through his hair as Rex slowed beside him. His posture confident, his eyes bright with life once more. Together, they walked beyond the fence, side by side, not as soldier and war dog, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two souls who had found their way home. Epilogue: some bonds never break. Months passed, and Rex thrived. He was no longer the ghost of his past. He was strong, loyal, and fiercely devoted to Jack. Jack had seen many battles, but none as difficult as the one fought within himself. And it was Rex, his steadfast companion, who had led him through it. One evening, Jack sat on the porch, watching as Rex dozed beside him, his tail flicking lazily in the warm breeze. He reached over, running his fingers through the German shepherd's fur. "You saved me too, boy," he murmured. Rex's eyes cracked open, his ears twitching at Jack's voice. Then, without hesitation, he nudged Jack's hand, just like he always used to. Jack chuckled. "Yes. Some bonds never break. And theirs never would." The end. A lesson in loyalty, healing, and unbreakable bonds. Jack and Rex's journey wasn't just about reunion, it was about redemption, trust, and healing. It showed us that no matter how deep the wounds, how painful the past, or how lost we may feel, love and patience can rebuild even the most broken souls. Rex had been abandoned, forgotten, and left to fend for himself, just as Jack had felt after leaving the military. Yet, through determination and unwavering commitment, Jack proved that true companionship never fades, and Rex, in turn, reminded him that some bonds are worth fighting for. This story is a testament to the resilience of the human and canine spirit. It teaches us that loyalty never dies, even after years apart, their connection endured. Healing takes time, trauma doesn't disappear overnight, but with love and patience, even the deepest wounds can heal. Never give up on those who matter, whether human or animal. The ones who stood by us in our darkest times deserve the same devotion in return. If this story touched your heart, let us know. Comment below, have you ever shared a special connection with an animal? Tell us your story, we'd love to hear it. Leave a like if you believe in the power of second chances and unwavering loyalty. Subscribe for more heartwarming and inspiring stories of incredible human-animal bonds. And most importantly, share this story with someone who needs a reminder that love, patience, and loyalty can overcome anything. Because some bonds can never be broken. Title: Retired War Dog Doesn't Recognize His Former Veteran. What happens next will give you chills. Description: after years apart, Jack Reynolds, a retired soldier, finally tracks down his former K9 partner, Rex. Once inseparable on the battlefield, their reunion at an animal shelter is anything but heartwarming. Rex doesn't recognize him. The loyal war dog, once full of energy and devotion, is now a shadow of his former self, trapped in trauma and silence. Determined to bring his best friend back, Jack embarks on an emotional journey of trust, healing, and unbreakable loyalty. With patience, familiar memories, and unwavering love, he fights to help Rex remember their bond. But just when hope seems lost, something incredible happens that changes everything.